This is Curley Lawson, LICSW. Of your discretion. I am not offering clinical guidance in this podcast. So I'm not advising, I'm not diagnosing, I'm not giving any clinical guidance at all. Just is purely educational. He just looked at me and said, "Your hair is out of regs. You know that your hair is out of regs. You volunteered to be in the Air Force. Nobody made you do this. Live up to that." No one ever had to tell me to get a haircut again. I mean, because he didn't give me what I expected. He gave me basically grow up and live up to your obligations. I mean, damn,
Disappointed father.
Not like scolding or yelling or anything, because I was braced for that. It was that air of not only disappointment, but you know better. And I know that you know better. You're not failing me, you're failing you.
Hey guys, welcome back. We're here for part 2 of the multi-episode series. I'm here with our Air Force veteran and the trauma therapist that we have, Curley Lawson. Welcome back, sir.
Hey, Josh, thanks. And it is good to be back. I am looking forward to another great episode.
And where we left off last time was we were just starting into your career in the Air Force. And you were talking about the like how you had a couple friends, a friend went into the Navy, I believe you said, and you were kind of looking at if you really find interest in going there. And so let's just start right there where you were looking to see what branch would be right for you.
All right. So the decision to join the military, which is, for most people in the military, I would say anyone that have really been in the military is one of the most significant decisions that we ever make. And for many of us, we make it while we're teenagers. Like, there's a degree of insanity around making one of the most significant decisions of your life when you're 18, but that's where I was, making one of the most difficult decisions of my life. And in that moment, I recognized that, just to recap, I recognized I needed some structure and discipline. And I figured the military, they were talking about structure and discipline all the time. So, I joined, but also what would be the good fit for me? And I didn't really know. So, like many people, I went down to talk to recruiters. And so one of the things that I understand now is that I didn't understand then is some people, teenagers, they have what's called identity foreclosure. I'm going to do this. You probably met Marines that were like, they were going to be a Marine from the time they were 3. And every year, they were like, they grew up in a family of Marines, long history of Marines. There's no doubt about being a Marine. I did not have that. I had something called more like identity diffusion. I have no idea what I wanted to be. I was a good student, but not being a great adult, quite honest. So for me, I went through this identity diffusion part. This is all part of Jane Marshall's theory of identity development, to something called identity moratorium, which is this exploring. Well, I wanted to be in the military, but I didn't know what branch of the military that I wanted to be in. And I talked to the Navy recruiters, and they were like, "Yeah, join the Navy, man. 70% of the world is like water, and you'll be on water all the time." And and absolutely no offense to my Navy brothers and sisters, I was like, that is a terrible pitch. So that is not really what I wanted. And so I talked to I talked to Marine Corps, a recruiter, and he had a pretty good spiel, but he was like, "Oh, discipline, dude, we got so much discipline." I was like, "Oh, this guy's got way too much discipline. I'm not ready for the kind of discipline that he was bringing." And I get, they had quotas and everything, and this is an interesting thing, man. I think I just walked into the Air Force recruiter maybe at a point where he'd hit his quota for the month, and he just was not hard selling or anything. And basically was like, "Man, I was gonna have an extended lunch, and what are you doing here?" And it was like, "Wait, aren't you supposed to be
Right.
like, yeah, let me think about it." So we talked about that, and really the thing that he pitched that was very appealing to me was education. He was like, if you're in the Air Force, you have to go to college. And I was like, okay. And it's like, the Air Force is going to pay for it. And of course, you know, he made it sound like the other branches wouldn't, but of course, like everyone that's been in the service knows, yeah, we all get the same deal educationally. So that had appealed to me. And I think I may have mentioned during the last episode, I went to Catholic school when I was young, and I didn't realize, maybe subconsciously, the Air Force uniform, the exact copy of my Catholic school uniform, which like dawned on me one day, was like, oh my God, did I join the Air Force because I went to Catholic school? Maybe something I'll work out with my therapist in the
Yeah,
future.
I'm sure.
So I got like this, very conscious decision, but maybe some subconscious things going on. And, so I signed on the dotted line and, like so I joined the Air Force. But even that was, so, I took the ASVAB, did well, but even then I still didn't know what I wanted to do. Like, well, like, what do you do when you're joining an organization you really don't know anything about it, and what you know about is primarily what you've seen from TV and movies? So I didn't know anyone in the Air Force. My father had been in the Navy, and an uncle that was in the Army. My older brother had been in the Army, and so they did not sell the Army to me at all. As a matter of fact, my oldest brother, he was like, "Well, I joined the military." He was not okay with me being in the military until I'd been in the military almost 18 years. And he was like, well, I guess it's all right. And I was like, dude, I'm almost done. What do you mean? I guess it's all right. So I had some family, like some family understanding. And maybe part of it is the Air Force was just different. The Air Force was not something that had been on the radar for the family at all. Really didn't know what I was going to do. Of course, recruiters promised the sun and the moon. I got neither. Did not get the sun or the moon, but I did get a job in electronics that I was proficient in, and then I gained the understanding, is something friends that I have from the Air Force we talk about, is that, when we're taking the ASVAB, well, it's not what we want to do. It's just simply like, what can we do? What's our utility to the service? And if you like it, bonus for you.
Right.
But you're gonna do the thing that is of the greatest value. So that's when I got this great lesson in, you know, being a useful widget, so to speak. And again, no disrespect to anybody's service, including my own, but I don't know that I would have picked, my job had I really understood what all the jobs were.
Right. And before we get any further, I do have some questions about
Yeah, absolutely.
you mentioned there are some points about the recruiter, how he wasn't trying to sell you, when I think about that, and I think we talked about this last time a little bit before we started recording, was the fact that the recruiters, at least in the Marine Corps, that was a tactic of them really not, like, yeah, I wasn't gonna ask you to join. Like if you came into the door and you're like, yeah, like, I'm not really sure. Okay, see ya. That we're not here. That's not for us.
Right.
And so that's I do believe that that's also a selling point. So they
Oh,
might
yeah.
have been taking
Definitely.
notes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man, yeah, trust me, I think like many of us, I have looked at that Rubik's Cube from every angle. It's like, was he really that deep? But, like, I don't think, and like, maybe you heard me coming down the hall. I don't know, like, this guy's been longer talking and everything, but it was like, it was, tie off. I mean, I recognize now, I should have had a tie on, tie off, feet literally on the deck. He was living his best life in that
Right.
moment. So maybe, but also, that could have been part of the deal too. Well, hey, look at me living my best life. So
Right.
it could have been, it could have been either way.
They say that authenticity sells, and I think that might have been it too, where he was able to just his laxness in his environment kind of inspires some level of confidence. I remember, like, I did sales for a short while, and that was one of the things that I picked up on, was that whenever you put on a gimmick or an act, people people get turned off by that. They notice that that it lacks authenticity, and that creates a level of discomfort that from the beginning you are, in my opinion, destroying your ability to sell, is if you aren't able to come off as authentic. And I think that authenticity too, that factor is might have inspired some level of comfort and like, oh, this seems like genuine. Like this guy comes off as a real human being, and I'm a real human being.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe I could be that.
It. I talked to a lot of recruiters and, about, their strategies, their tactics, their training. And it could be that, but also you're right. Authenticity, being genuine is something that we respond very well to. And in that moment, he could have just been literally unguarded in that moment. And, and maybe that was the thing that made the connection. Had it been, you know, later that day or earlier that morning or anything, it could have been a completely different decision. And there is, I don't know, and I don't want to like use anything that is, pejorative, but like so many of the decisions, particularly associated to the military, are things that could have been a flip of the coin. This day or that day, this assignment, not that assignment. I traded an assignment once and wound up, every time I made a move in the Air Force, it was a change in trajectory in my life. And there were times that were like quite literally a fork in the road. Do I do this thing? Do I do that thing? And as I look back upon them, I don't have regret, but I do have curiosity. Had I taken an assignment at an embassy instead of taking an assignment to Germany, like what would that have done for the rest of my life? Had I taken an assignment to go to Kansas instead of Washington or something like that? So every one of those decisions for some had huge significance in my life, but in a moment I was just living my life.
Yeah.
So when we look back and go like, oh wow, had I made any different decision points along the way, would I be where I am now? Would I be who I am now? And
Yeah.
things.
I think that's a fair point. Another thing that you had mentioned too that I thought was interesting was what your brother said about that he wasn't trying to sell you on the army. And I understand that perspective. In fact,
Yeah.
I wouldn't want my younger sibling to do the same thing that I did because it was good. It was good for me in that I didn't. There's a lot that that the Marine Corps could teach me, but then there's also a sense there's an environment aspect of it. There's a reason I left. For me, like I there's a lot I got out of it, and if it wasn't for the Marine Corps, I think that my life would have been very different. And I am grateful for it, but it's not for everybody. Um, and I don't think to learn what I have learned, I don't think it's necessary to have gone through it's necessary to go through that path. It worked for me, but it's just not for everyone. And particularly my only younger sibling is my younger sister, and so I don't know that she would have the same experience in the Marine Corps as I would if she were to come in. And it's just a tough environment. I don't it's not for everybody. I wouldn't promote it. I would support it, of course, if she was like, I'm gonna do it anyway and I don't care what you say. All right, I respect that.
Yeah.
But I just don't think it's necessary to go through that route to learn the things that I got out of it to do what I'm doing now. So I understand why he didn't sell you on it. It's just it's not for everybody, and it's just there's other options.
Yeah. And I say this to people very frequently. Everything is not for everybody. So my experience not for everybody, and quite honestly, no one would have the experiences that I had. Even if someone made the exact same choices that I made, they wouldn't have the same experience that I had. They wouldn't be surrounded by the same people. Times are different. I'm like, there's just so many, variables there. We couldn't calculate them all. And I think that, when people look through a decision that someone else is making and they've made a similar decision, they consider, well, was it good for me? How good was it for me? I know this person, how good would it be for them? Like, you probably have friends that you thought, yep, you'd be a great Marine. You probably have other friends where you're like, you would not make it through boot camp. And we know that. So we would maybe discourage, man, that may not be the path for you.
Right.
As opposed to go like, well, you'll find out.
Yeah, I think that's another fair point actually. That the fact that some people have personalities cut out for it. Um,
Yes.
like for me, I feel that I'm pretty different from the rest of my siblings in that I'm very brash, or at least I was, and I was outspoken. I spoke my mind, and I said I'm going to do this, and no matter what, and that was my mentality. And what I found out, I used to think that the Marine Corps like added um like a personality to me, but that's not really what happened. I think what happened is it kind of just made whatever was there louder, and I think that that's what the Marine Corps kind of brought out of me was just whatever you are at your core. Not now you're just that times 10, and so like you just there's the confidence in that this is me. And before I was like quiet about it, and I was like, oh, I don't think they're gonna like it if I say this, and well, I don't know if I should do that because it might upset this person, and the Marine Corps was just it like punched through that and was like, well, you're gonna have to be uncomfortable all the time, and whatever's there is gonna have to come out. So here we go. And that was what kind of forced my confidence in saying what I'm gonna say. And if I'm wrong, then I will acknowledge that I'm wrong and we will learn. But the fear of what if I do it wrong? What if I say this and it's not right? And that had to go away. And so it just brought out whatever personality was already there and it just amplified it. And so that's why I'm saying that I think that it wouldn't be, I can't see any of my other siblings doing it because they're just, their personalities aren't, don't match with what the military does, which is it kind of like pressurizes whatever's there to come out.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I thinking of an experience, my first time home on leave, my first assignment, I was stationed in England. I'm home on leave. I'm downtown Chicago, middle of the like busy like day, at maybe 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, something like that. Traffic congestion, everything, inner city going on. And a kid is hit by a taxi. And there's a big crowd of people. And at this point, I'm, probably 21. And there's a large crowd of people standing around this accident scene, all adults, professionals, everything. And I just went to the kid who was lying on the ground, told him not to move. His grandfather wanted to move him, no, don't move him, keep him here. And then I just started telling people what to do. You call 911, you block traffic, you do. And everyone did what I told them to do. Everyone. So I'm this, from their perspective, I'm this kid, I'm in jeans and a t-shirt. They don't know anything about me, and everyone else is, business, people, and and it all worked out okay. The kid was, fine. But when I got up, there was a like kind of like, wow. And this like, lady came over and it's like, do you work at a hospital? Like, oh my gosh. And it was like, no, I fix airplanes, kind of thing. That necessity of speaking up in the moment, because, sometimes if I didn't deliver information in a timely manner, it literally could have been life or death for somebody else. So I didn't have time you don't have time to hem and haw. It's just, these are the facts, just what we have to go with. Someone needs this information to make a decision. And very often people don't know what to do because they haven't been trained what to do. And in that instance, I've been trained what to do.
I think that that's another thing that is one of the things, the takeaways, I guess, because some people want to be led. When there's fear and there's some people, their personality types make them withdraw and, the fight or flight response. And I think that regardless of the branch, the military is very good at making you like whatever is there, it comes forward at its best when it's under pressure. And I think that that's something that the military is very good at, is creating people who operate best under pressure. And you see the best. I've heard like special operators talk about this, and this is like much higher level version of this, but they've said that when we come under pressure, that's when we come up. And that's the idea is that under pressure, you want people who can operate well and aren't frightened by pressure, because that's the best decisions that you can make is when you're calm. And if you can remain calm in serious situations, I think you stand the best chance of survival. and and I think that that's something that it brings out in just about anybody who enters the military, or at least they get better at it than they were.
Right. And most people don't have vocations that are going to have that type of pressure, or certainly not have that type of pressure suddenly. And in the military, there's a lot of sudden pressure. I mean, there's, today's news is tomorrow's deployment. So it is that your whole world could change instantly, and you could be fine with your friends, and the next thing you know, things are sideways in ways no one could have predicted, and you have to figure out what to do.
Yeah. And so moving forward, as you go into your school, and you said the electronics, right, was your
Right.
like air on airplanes, you worked on their electronics. What would you say was the challenge for you in that? Was that an easy school, or was that a difficult?
Well, let's see. It was a little bit of both. So I found myself at Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi, right on the Gulf Coast. And the school, what was challenging and interesting for me about the school was for me understanding I could grasp the complexity of of these systems and how they worked, and begin to see it like in my head. So that was, it's one thing when someone says, hey, you got this box and you're gonna figure out how it can navigate around the world. What? Like, am I? Yeah, you are. So not only learning how things work, but how to take them apart, put them back together. And there's a degree of uh, meticulousness that was required that I didn't know that I had. It was like a lot of, boys and teenage boys, we go for gross motor things. I can throw the ball, I can, jump, I can run. Can I take something that is, a tenth the size of my fingernail and get it into place and solder it to a point so it makes this connection? So now this, $1 million computer works. Yes. Is it going to be easy?
Yeah.
No. And so learning that was very interesting for me. I was being challenged in ways, some that I probably anticipated being challenged, but also in ways that I hadn't anticipated being challenged. Well, how do I calculate this? And learning, logic trees, which are basically logic, a lot of if then statements. If this is happening, then this, that, which is applicable to life in so many ways. So the challenge of that was I can do the task. The ongoing challenge, I think, was still adjusting to being in the military, and, like, hey, why do we have to march everywhere? Because there's 10,000 19-year-olds on this base, and we got to move them around efficiently. Oh, okay, I guess marching makes sense. So getting that greater sense of how the military works was it's not all over after basic training. And which you think going into basic training, well, when I leave basic training, you'll be one rung up on the ladder when you leave basic training, and you got many, many more rungs to go. So it was learning some more of those rungs as well.
I want to ask you about, you said that it was a bunch of 19-year-olds. I find it pretty interesting how, I don't know, I think um what brings us all so close together, and I'd love to know your professional opinion on this, is boot camp is kind of like a what's the word again? A trauma bond, isn't it? In theory, isn't that how that works?
Well,
Now we're so
well,
close.
it's not so well. Ideally, boot camp shouldn't be traumatic. It might feel that way, but it's not.
Uh-huh.
But it is a bonding experience.
Yeah.
It is a shared experience, and a lot of things are happening in boot camp. And in one of my therapy groups, I would ask, like, well, how did boot camp get developed? Because it wasn't a bunch of like E5s board sitting around. Like that was developed by psychologists.
Mm.
And there is this aspect of how to, basically break them down, build them up. The first thing, happens is we are immediately stripped of our identity. And so we can start gaining this new identity. And that's a bit of a shock. So I would say that there's, this, I'm not saying that it's like we're being attacked, but we lose our identity immediately. We're given another identity immediately. We have to learn a different language immediately, a hierarchy immediately. And we're tasked to do things that don't make sense. And we are literally drilled in a way that, high school doesn't occur. So maybe if someone, played, sport, there might have been a little of that from coaching, but, boot camp is beyond all of that. So while not a trauma bond, because again, if boot camp is traumatic, then they're doing it wrong. But it is this bonding experience while we are establishing like new identity, new values, new culture. So the other thing is like boot camp, it gathers all these people with, wide ranging values, and there's a significant amount of overlap, but everyone's values aren't the same.
Right.
And we're told, well, your values are your values, but these are now your more important values. These are the values that you will hold on to like the entire time that you're serving. These are the core values that you have now. So we have to adjust and adopt these core values. And if there's friction, that gets, sanded off of us until we accept it. Or if someone cannot accept it at all, then they're discharged. I mean, because sometimes people are just, hey, you're just not a good fit. And we've done all the boot camp things that we can do, and you're still not getting it. So, every now and then they have, somebody's discharged because they're just not a good fit. But that bonding experience that we go through, it is the part of becoming family. There's a reason we use the expression like brothers and sisters, but the first thing is like we are stripped of our identity.
It's such a interesting thing because the Marines are a huge part of my life. They're really the family that I have leaned on in my adult years, and so it's funny, we've had many group gatherings at this point. I do this thing every year where I gather the Marines for the birthday, and just as we did in the Marine Corps, where we celebrated the Marine Corps birthday, I love that tradition. I think that there are bits and pieces that I loved about the Marine Corps that I'm going to incorporate this because this is what I liked about being in the Marine Corps. But I brought those elements in. So when we get together, we kind of talk about what we went through, and we talk about the experiences, and so we kind of came to the conclusion, like when we first kind of got together and as a group, and we get in boot camp, and the chaos that happens, in some sense, it is we were like, isn't it like just a trauma bond? Because at first, and then later, it becomes a chosen friendship where after the fact, you decide that actually, I became really close with this person based off of just things that I needed them for, and they came through, and there was just that reliability to them, and that by the way, I don't find commonly out of the military. So I just was super interested in that concept because boot camp, the reason why I am kind of sitting on that idea that isn't it just a trauma bond is because at least for the Marine Corps job is to prepare you to make chaos that will make you prepared in combat, because that is the whole point of the Marine Corps. At least that is a fighting force. So if the idea is that that's the sole purpose that you are built for, and that the Marine Corps creates Marines for, isn't boot camp supposed to be at some level traumatic? Because if not traumatic, if they make it less than traumatic and you experience something that is extremely traumatic, and which is combat, how are they preparing you psychologically to deal with that and continue to operate?
All right. So, man, All right, a whole like so much to unpack there, and I get everything that you're saying, and there's so much truth in it, and the difficulty that everyone has is how do you prepare? To what extent can you prepare someone for a traumatic experience when the only thing that actually prepares someone, if we can be prepared for a traumatic experience, is a traumatic experience?
Mhm.
It's like the only way we can train you to, be prepared for a plane crash is to crash a plane. Well, maybe we don't want to actually crash the plane. So how close to, a plane crash or fire? Because one of the um, community colleges near me, they have firefighting academy there. So, they can't, so the fire department just can't set somebody's house randomly on fire. They got like a special house for it, things like that. And so in boot camp, and if you did, don't tell me because I don't want to know, but you all probably didn't kill anybody in boot camp. So you probably did so approximations. So that's the real challenge of like training for trauma is how close can we get to trauma and without actually without it actually being traumatic. And lots of the field of medicine. So how do you train someone to be an ER doc without it actually, you kind of inch them into it and eventually you get them into an actual ER. But even initially, like day one, hour one, they're probably not making the calls. They're probably, shadowing somebody else or something like that. So that incremental training that we go through to get us as close as possible is really the best we can do, because the downside is if we put people if we truly traumatize people, we may be preventing them from actually doing the best that they could do.
Mm.
So we spend a lot of time trying to undo trauma and heal trauma for people. But there is something else, man, about that closeness, that bond that comes that we all share. And there's a level of open, honest communication that starts in boot camp and probably extends for most of us through our active duty time that we just don't have with other people. What couldn't you say in boot camp? Now, probably have friends that like haven't served and everything. We all self-edit, but like when we've had that identity like stripped away from us, and it's like late at night or early in the morning or whatever, and at the time when there's no, drill sergeants around and people are talking, there's this raw, genuine authenticity where people talk about their most real things, their hurts, their fears, their hopes, their expectations, and we'll share in exhausting detail. You probably know some of your friends, you probably know more about some of their experiences, some of their more painful experiences than their families, than their
Oh
spouses,
yeah. Oh yeah.
everyone. And that promotes a level of connection, of emotional depth that most people don't have. They just like that is a gift that the rest of the world really doesn't understand is when we have people that we can say anything to and we're not going to be rejected, we don't have to self-edit or anything like that, and we can be our most authentic self with. And that authentic self is still has belonging, not even accepted, but still has belonging. And we give anything for that. Then
That's such a Yeah, sorry to cut you off. I think that's such a great point about you know things about them that their own family doesn't. I think the reason I think is also because you get to see them in situations in which their family members don't, which
right,
is which is when they're extremely stressed out, extremely tired and worn, and so you see a lot of those sometimes I guess like the internal monologue come out of whatever your belief is about yourself. The what it is that you believe about yourself comes out, I think, most honestly when you are struggling, where it's like when all of the filters go away and all you're left with is just you and your brain, how what is it that you're saying to yourself? And I think that that's something that people's family don't ever get to see because they hopefully because they don't
Right.
live in that constant stress or in that difficult mental fatigue that we do in the military.
So we see people at their absolute best and their absolute worst.
Yep.
And sometimes that could be in the same day. It may be hours, minutes away from, you know, something absolutely heroic to something that someone felt was, a personal failure. And sometimes the difference is simply perspective. And a buddy of mine, I can't really go super deep into his
Yep.
story, but he told me about his worst failing as a soldier, and we were talking about that, and I just reframed that. But in that moment, man, you were being the best human being that you could be. Disobeyed an order, but saved his friend's life. And I was like, in that moment, yep, maybe you're being the worst soldier because you disobeyed an order. And maybe you're being the best human because you saved your friend's life. And like,
Mm.
wonder how he and his wife and kids feel about you saving his life. He was like, holy shit. He was like, man, I've been so focused on what I did wrong. I didn't even see what was right for others. So there's that aspect of it. Yeah, it's real life. Just a little bit of profanity, but that's some real stuff. So but that was around the moment for me, man. It but we have that with each other in ways that a lot of people don't. So you know, and that's a real part of combat. I think a lot of people don't understand. It doesn't make sense for so many people that anyone would ever want to return to combat. But it makes sense if it is like, man, what wouldn't you do to be in an environment where you're being your best, everyone around you is being their best, and you're gonna have absolute belonging and be open and genuine and authentic about everything. And like that is so powerful. People will return to a combat zone to get it. And there's probably not a lot of people just going, yay, combat is fun. But that idea of I'm going to be there for my brothers, I'm going to be there for my family, I'm going to be there because they need me no matter what. Well, how could that make sense to someone that hasn't ever been on that arc, that's never been on that journey? That couldn't make sense at all.
I'd like to get into the greatest lessons learned, and I guess both the good, the bad, and the ugly. Is there any that you can think of that come to mind?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that come to mind. So, yeah, at my first training base, I'm, at this point I'm 19 and still like becoming an adult. And there are a couple of things, man, that stung me. And this is something that I never let go of. And at one point I just decided, not an issue for me now, but at one point I just decided, well, I'm not getting a haircut. And I just decided I'm going to see how long it will take someone to make me get a haircut. I mean, like just total ridiculous teenage rebellious nonsense.
I'm
But
cringing at just the sound of that.
well, I felt like so, go week, go two, go three, and it is, oh dude, it is so like it's utter and like nobody said anything. And one day one of the instructors, he was like, Lawson, get over here. And I'm like, all right, this is it. So I'm prepared for what I think is coming my way. And he just looked at me and said, your hair is out of regs. You know that your hair is out of regs. You volunteered to be in the Air Force. Nobody made you do this. Live up to that. No one ever had to tell me to get a haircut again. I mean, because he didn't give me what I expected. He gave me basically grow up and live up to your obligations. And he delivered it in a way that I needed to hear it. And I
Mm.
was like, I mean, damn, just, I mean,
Disappointed father.
yeah, really. Like, and not like scolding or yelling
Yeah.
or anything, because I was braced for that. And I was like, part of me maybe even wanted that. I don't know why, but it wasn't that. Thanks, man. It was that air of not only disappointment, but you know better. And I know that you know better. And not even, you're not failing me, you're failing you. And never, I mean, after that, got it, gonna do the uniform thing, gonna get the haircuts. I mean, it was basically, yep, I'm gonna do what it takes to stay in uniform from that point forward. So that was a and what I really got about that from that man was that that lesson was delivered not with thunder and lightning, didn't raise his voice, didn't take a long time. So that was a powerful message for me too. It was the message is important, how the message is delivered is also important. And that was a very significant takeaway for me because it was not only did he just metaphorically hold up a mirror to me and go, look at what you're doing, but you chose to be where you are right now. No one made you do this. This is your choice. Live up to your choice. Wow. Okay. So that was powerful. And the other thing that really stood out to me, I let that day did like several assignments, wound up back there for training for something else. And this was a significant moment for me. Was I'm walking down the street and a staff car pulls over, flags on the staff car, passenger swings open, and all I hear is "get in," and I'm like, "Oh."
Uh, uh, is this an abduction?
So I get in, and there is a very, very angry two-star in this car. And he's like, at this point now, I'm a sergeant, like, Sergeant, like, do you know I pulled you, like why I pulled you in here? Like, do you know why you're here right now? And I am like just thunderstruck, and it's all the custom and courtesies, sir, no, sir. And he was like, I drove by and you did not salute. And but I didn't see him. I'm not, no doubt that he drove by, but it's probably lost in my own head. And there was like no intentional like disrespect at all. And as I was beginning to say that, he launched into a tirade that was, I wish I could have recorded it. It was, it was, it was thunderbolts and lightning. And I had to like sit there and like take it because, sergeants don't get to argue with major generals. And then he ended this tirade with telling me that I will never forget this. I was singly ethning up the United States Air Force. And I was just, like, what do you even do with that? But like my takeaway from that was, man, power doesn't always make you right.
That one, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to stop you there. That was one of my biggest lessons in the military. Was my understanding of leadership was when I was an 18 and 19-year-old was that I was under the impression that as these guys come up, so does their maturity, so does their style of leadership. Everything matures evenly. That was my understanding. But as I saw for myself, people, maturity isn't a requirement to get into those roles. And I figured that out over time. And that's another thing that helped me learn to speak to, in this case, like officers. Um, I learned that they're just people too.
Sure.
And that really helped me learn to communicate with other people that in your head, you're like, oh, they're these, these giants and they must be like, the amount of maturity in them is, who am I to question them? And I think that some people depend on that. is for you to feel that way so that
Right.
they can, because they have their own stuff going on. You know, maybe they had a traumatic upbringing. A lot of the reasons why we come into the military isn't necessarily
Yeah.
because we've had the best upbringing. In
Yeah.
fact, for me personally, it was about that. I learned this later, obviously. I knew this only subconsciously at the time, but later I figured out that to me, the Marine Corps was kind of like my dad. Like I didn't really have a father figure. And
Yeah.
so I kind of like the military was kind of me learning to figure out what it's like to be an adult man. And that was my experience. So what is your takeaway?
So my takeaway from that are like these are people and these are also flawed people. They have the same flaws that everyone else has. However, you're right about the hierarchy. Who are the people telling us that they're giants? They are. So, so the hierarchy around that is very interesting. And one of the things that, as a therapist, that I really honed in on when someone in a position of authority in this hierarchy, when there's such a big difference between you are and you did. And so you are rings in our ears forever. So I've had, people that, whatever disciplinary action they went through, and it's like, oh my God, and Captain Zorzo is this, and Dad, I'm this, and you're that, and blah, blah, blah. And I would go, wow, man, how long ago was that? 10, 15 years, whatever the distance was, time frame was, and going, how old was that captain then? And they go, I don't know, 24. How old are you now? 40. Think about that. They were 24, you were 20, whatever happened. But yeah, a 24-year-old, raining thunder on like, this 20-year-old. And I had an opportunity man a couple of years ago to do some training with some officers at Fort Lewis. And that was one of the things that I really pointed out with them. Because, I took one, a young lieutenant that I hope he's okay. And I just rained thunder and lightning and knife handed and you are, you are, you are. And then I gave another example and like, you did, you did, you did. And I asked him, what was the difference? And he was like, man, that was night and day. Like you did was behavior. You did was I can fix this. You did was I got something to learn. You did was training. You were like, you did was, okay, this is resolvable. You are is failure. That's flawed. That's inherently you. So when we hear that you are from someone in a position of authority and we're taught to believe and follow that authority, we can take it to heart and it could be completely wrong. I am fairly confident I did not single-handedly F up the United States. Really, like the rest of the Air Force didn't come for me, so I think that that's
Yeah.
okay. But the reason, but I want you to consider, like that rang in my ears for years because it was someone in this position of authority just basically laying every fault in the Air Force on my shoulders. I mean, and I was like, like funny thing right now, but in the moment, I was like, man, there's no comeback from this.
Yeah.
I'm just
Isn't it
swatted like a fly.
isn't it looking back at it now, isn't it wasn't he saying more about himself in that moment than he was about you?
Yeah, yeah, I think so, and I'm like, I'm okay with it now. I've learned how to process those things
Yeah.
and dissect them and get that. But I know everyone hasn't. I know that there are people listening to this podcast, watching it, and they're thinking about, man, somebody said something to them when they're on active duty, and it's just rang in them, and it just hurt them. And I just want to say that thing's not true. That person didn't know you. That person, didn't understand what was going on in your life at that time. And we give these people power. I mean, and I get it. The structure of the military is, very important. I understand it, but that power is not always wielded in a way that is beneficial. And I get that we have to have standards and corrective measures and things like that. I'm not saying that's a problem, but it's like how we use that. And there's just some understanding of human psychology. There's a huge difference between what we did and who we are. And we are in an environment, those of us that served in the military, we're in an environment where our identity has already been shifted and changed significantly. So we're prone to believe you're this because somebody said that. We've already gone through the significant identity shift already. So, you know, a lieutenant colonel says or a commander says, you're this, you're this, you're this. Okay, then I guess I must be that. And that person might have spent 5 minutes reviewing a case before you walked into the room for them to, give disciplinary action or something like that. So I try to really, really deconstruct that with people and go, well, could that be true? And even if it was true, is it still true now?
Right.
Because you are is huge, man. I tell people the only thing more powerful than you are is I am. So we get to define ourselves. When we can define ourselves, I can hear all the you are directed at me all day because I am really good at I am at this point.
Oh, that's such a good advice there. That I am. I definitely think that is a more powerful word than you are. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that part. Wow, that
Oh
was
yeah.
super good.
Oh, the thing I point out about that, for those that are, Judeo-Christian practice like aspects of faith, I go, I am is self-reverential for God for those that follow those beliefs. I go like, that's how powerful that is. I am, and nobody tells God you are for those that
Yeah.
follow. Well, you're like, no, I am. So there's a lot of power in that concept of I am. And we can go like, yeah, I am myself, but I did this because I've had some, oh man, I have done some things in the Air Force. I look back on my career and sometimes I think, oh, lucky I made it, especially the first half when I was just, I just wanted to have fun. I mean, I had the structure around me and I wanted to have fun. And the Air Force said, hey, we'll put you in places where you can have fun. So I had a lot of fun. I don't regret it. Probably could have used some of that time better. I don't want to get into barroom stories or anything like that. But
Yeah.
if you served, you probably know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So, but I when I look back now and go like, oh yeah, I moved through that developmental stage into the next stages of my life where I was able to take on more responsibility and then increasingly take on more responsibility. Like I really started to grow not only in the Air Force, but I used those tools the Air Force gave me after I left the Air Force to continue to grow. And one of the most interesting things about my military career, at one point I was an instructor. I was an instructor for 4 years. I did not volunteer to be an instructor because needs of the building your branch of the military
Yeah.
comes first. And so my assignment I was stationed in Iceland. I had assignment to England. I had this whole plan about just being in Europe and having a time of my life. And they put the skids on that and said, you're going back to Mississippi to be an instructor. And it is not a thing that I wanted. And interestingly enough, Josh, of everything that I did in the military, in my post-military career, that is the skill set that I rely on the most, is the thing that I wanted to do the least. Because, and I appreciate the irony of that now, becoming, being an adjunct professor at a university, public speaking, like so many of the things that are a big part of my life currently, were rooted in that skill set that I developed becoming an instructor in the Air Force.
When you talk about the skill set, what exactly do you refer to? What skill set is it that you really got out of that?
Okay. Well, first off, how do you talk to people? How do you engage with an audience? How do you present information in a manner that hopefully the audience can follow? So there's some concepts like whole, part, whole. The idea of today, I'm going to tell you, if I walk into a room or a briefing room or a classroom or anything, and I say, I'm going to tell you in the next hour, I'm going to tell you the most important thing that you're ever going to hear. It's going to keep you alive. It's going to keep your family alive. And if you pay really close attention, you're probably going to make $1 million. Well, now I have your attention. So even like those attention, unless you don't like your family, are like, I don't need $1 million, and I don't. But for most people, like those skills are things that we don't learn, and how to be comfortable with discomfort, and how to handle ambiguity. Things aren't always going to go right, and things go wrong in public spaces all the time. So what do you do when the podium falls over? What do you do when this thing happens? I mean, in the middle of a presentation, you just can't say, "Oh, let's start over." You have to, think on the fly and be able to do things. So that became very useful for me.
When you say an instructor, I just want to be clear. Are you referring to like were they MTIs in the Air Force? What are they called? Is that what you're
So
referring to?
no, so I was an electronics instructor. So the
Oh,
school that I went to learn about electronics, I became an instructor there.
okay.
So so lots of time in the classroom, and it was such a great skill set that I developed. Even though I didn't want to be an instructor, I won awards for instructors, and like best instructor of the wing and all kinds of stuff that like is pretty meaningless now. But it was like I didn't want to do this job, but it also let me know there's more there's more for me than the electronics aspect of my job. So it was this understanding of people, and also the other thing that was really important for me during that time frame, it was the first time that I went to therapy. Because when I was busy on a flight line where there's no time for that, are you kidding? Get out
Mhm.
there. Your therapy is a toolbox, and go out there and work and fix things. But in the instructor role, my day was structured differently. I could do appointments after work and things like that. So that was the first time that I went to therapy. And my first experience in therapy was so illuminating for me, because I was like struggling with some things, and I go see I've seen a psychologist, and at one point it may be my third or fourth session, he was like, Curly, have you thought about getting out of the Air Force? Like maybe the Air Force isn't maybe it's not like the fit for you that you want it to be. And I go, man, I mean, I said, like, isn't your job like to keep me in the Air Force? Like, what do you mean get out of the Air Force? And I asked him, and I had a great rapport with him, and he said, no, my job is to help you become healthy. And you talk about a light coming on in that moment, because everything and everyone else was like, man, you got a stage, like there was this huge drive, stay, be a part of the team, the mission, all of those things, all of that mattered. And now I had someone saying, no, it's about you being healthy. That's my job. And I walked out of his office with this sense of, whoa, I haven't heard that before. And that really resonated with me. It's like, because at that point, like my annual checkups were, you doing okay? Yep. See you next year. So I wasn't really,
Right.
talking to anyone about anything. And the first time that I, recognized, man, I'm having like a real mental health struggle, and went to see a counselor, uh, because at that point I wasn't worried about like my security clearance or anything, because that was something that always kept us away from
Right.
like, doing anything in mental health. But at that point, like my security clearance wasn't really going to be an issue. So I was like, oh, I'm going to talk to someone. And he's like, no, my job is to help you get healthy. So I was like, wow, that
Before I think that's a great stopping point, but I want to ask you before we check out here. Now, is this therapist in the Marine Corps? There's something similar where you can talk to somebody like a counselor of some sort, and it's provided by the unit. And so, is this individual also Air Force,
yep.
but qualified as a therapist?
Yep. Air Force psychologist, captain, uh, and so not assigned to my unit, but assigned to the hospital there
Okay.
for the base. Yep.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, that's super interesting. I think that's going to be a great starting point for our next conversation.
Mhm.
Um, I was again super grateful for you making time for this, and I know that everybody's probably going to be clinging to the edge of their seats with our stopping point here,
Tune
uh,
in next week.
but you'll have to check in the next episode for this next part. But thank you so much again, Curly, and I'm looking forward to the next conversation.